All right, let's talk about the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, which protects 5 basic freedoms: speech, press, religion, assembly, and the right to petition the government. But here's the thing about rights: they're like muscles. If you don't use them, they atrophy. That's where First Amendment audits come in. They involve individuals exercising their First Amendment rights in public spaces to see if those rights are respected. These audits aren't just abstract legal exercises. They're about ensuring your right to call out a terrible toupee in a town hall meeting is as protected as a journalist's right to report. So buckle up as we dive into the 5 freedoms the First Amendment offers and how these audits help keep them flowing. Let's start with everyone's favorite, freedom of speech. It protects our right to express ourselves without fear of government censorship. Sometimes those in power try to silence dissenting voices or create vague rules to shut down opposition. Auditors go to public places, record or express opinions to test the boundaries of free speech. These audits expose those who've gotten too comfortable with their authority and remind everyone that the First Amendment applies to all. If someone tries to stop you from expressing your opinion in a public space, you can politely point them to the Constitution. Next up, we have freedom of the press. It's about ensuring the public has access to information, even if it makes those in power uncomfortable. Journalists hold the government accountable by investigating corruption and exposing wrongdoing. First Amendment audits ensure journalists can do their jobs without fear of harassment or intimidation. By documenting interactions with law enforcement and testing press freedom boundaries, auditors create a record of how these rights are upheld. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing. Beautiful. Chapter 3. Freedom of religion. Not my circus, not my monkeys, not my business. The First Amendment states that the government can't establish a state religion or interfere with the free exercise of your chosen faith. This means you're free to worship a flying spaghetti monster, a charismatic houseplant, or nothing at all. There have been instances of government officials trying to impose their own religious beliefs on others or discriminate against certain faiths. First Amendment audits ensure everyone's right to religious freedom is respected, whether it's testing if religious groups can hold meetings in public spaces, or challenging discriminatory policies. Auditors act as watchdogs. The separation of church and state is about protecting religion from government interference. Everyone is free to worship, or not, as they please. Chapter 4. Freedom to assemble peacefully. Because sometimes you need to complain with friends. The First Amendment protects our right to gather in groups, protest, and make our voices heard, as long as we're not hurting anyone or inciting a riot. This right is fundamental to a functioning democracy because it allows us to hold those in power accountable and demand change. First Amendment audits ensure our right to assemble is protected. By documenting interactions with law enforcement during protests and testing permit requirements, auditors deter those who might suppress this right. The freedom to assemble is about coming together to express shared concerns and work towards a better future, and that's something worth fighting for. Chapter 5. Freedom to petition the government. Because complaining directly is also fun. This right allows us to contact our elected officials, express our concerns, and demand change. It's the equivalent of walking right up to the manager and demanding to speak to their manager, except the manager is the government. First Amendment audits safeguard this right by ensuring citizens can access government officials and submit petitions without fear of retaliation. Some governments can be pretty shady when it comes to actually listening to the people they represent. The freedom to petition the government is about engaging in the political process and holding our elected officials accountable. And that's something worth writing a strongly worded letter about. The First Amendment. Use it or lose it, and nobody wants that. The 5 pillars of freedom make up the First Amendment, and First Amendment audits help keep those freedoms safe. The core message is simple: don't take your rights for granted. The First Amendment is the cornerstone of a free and democratic society, but it requires constant vigilance. So the next time you see someone filming in a public space or expressing an unpopular opinion, appreciate that they're exercising their First Amendment rights. Because freedom, much like a delicious ripe avocado, is something to be cherished, protected, and definitely not taken for granted.